The holidays had passed in a flurry, leaving Governor Adrian Thorne buried in the kind of administrative minutiae that made his former life in the capital feel like a distant dream. There was the new county charter to ratify, the trade school to establish, and 100 other matters demanding his seal. He barely had time to think, let alone seek out Julian, who seemed to have a knack for being occupied elsewhere whenever a moment of quiet presented itself. Adrian wasn't even sure what he would say. He just wanted to see the man look content for once, a goal for which he had no clear strategy. The winter thawed, its gray slush yielding to the determined green of spring, and with it, the restoration of the Beacon Library became the territory's chief project. Julian threw himself into it, supervising the work crews on the mountain with a relentless energy, his boots perpetually caked with mud. A month of this feverish activity transformed the fire-scarred shell into a structure of renewed promise. Adrian mentioned the library's progress in a letter to the president, a carefully worded update that earned a commendation and a federal grant for 1,000 volumes of historical texts. The dedication ceremony was a grand affair. Adrian's old university mentor, Professor Lu Chang, and the renowned philosopher Dr. Evan Branch were invited to speak. The Beacon Library's reputation was thus established, its name echoing through intellectual circles across the country. With this significant project concluded, Julian retreated to his private residence, his presence becoming even scarcer. Adrian, however, having delegated a great deal of his authority by appointing Lawrence Kane as his chief of staff, found himself with an unaccustomed amount of free time. It was time to address the matter that had been weighing on his mind. He announced a tour of the county's remote northern border, specifically requesting Julian's attendance. Julian complied. His suspicion peaked when he noticed Adrian had brought only 4 of his security detail, leaving his primary aides, Elias and Angstrom, behind. They stopped in a small, dusty town called Rockwood, where Adrian declared a need for rest. That evening, dressed in inconspicuous civilian clothing, Adrian led Julian from their lodging to a waiting car and they drove east. Julian watched the familiar landscape of the territory give way to unincorporated county land, a silent question forming in his mind. A governor leaving his jurisdiction without authorization was a serious political offense. He remained quiet as they drove, his unease growing until they reached the bustling town of Fairview. He observed Adrian produce a set of commercial travel papers to pass through the local checkpoint, a detail that only deepened his confusion. The town was alive with commerce. Adrian noted Julian's curious glances and commented with feigned indifference that he had heard Fairview was Julian's registered place of birth. He suggested that if Julian had any family here, he should take the opportunity to visit them. Julian's expression flickered, a subtle shift that Adrian misinterpreted as delighted surprise. He felt a swell of satisfaction, certain his gesture was a masterstroke of compassion. He continued, pretending to study the street, telling Julian that he had instructed Angstrom to pack a small crate of local crafts from their own territory, so he wouldn't arrive empty-handed. Adrian would wait for him at the Providence Inn, the town's most prominent establishment. He pointed toward its highest balcony, feeling immensely thoughtful. By sending Julian alone, he was affording him the privacy for a heartfelt reunion, a chance to regain face before his kin. Such a kindness, Adrian reasoned, would surely dissolve the man's reserve and earn his gratitude. Julian hesitated before giving a slow, quiet affirmation of his thanks for the governor's consideration. He would go then. Adrian gave a curt, satisfied nod, assuring him that Leo would remain with him, so Julian could take all the time he needed. Julian lowered his gaze and walked away, leading the horse that carried the gifts. The street was a clamor of voices and wagon wheels. He walked slowly, turning into a quiet alleyway, once he was sure Adrian could no longer see him. He approached an old woman sitting on her porch steps, sifting through a basket of dried herbs in the afternoon sun. He asked her if she knew the way to the Faulkner residence on Sunrise Avenue. The old woman looked up, her eyes narrowing as she scrutinized him. She stated flatly that the Faulkner family was long gone. Julian stood frozen for a moment. From inside the house, a bright voice called out, asking the old woman who she was talking to. The woman replied that it was just someone asking for directions. A younger woman emerged, wearing a simple blue dress with her hair tied in a floral scarf. Her face was heart-shaped and her eyes were sharp and intelligent. Seeing the well-dressed and handsome young man, she smiled. She asked what place he was looking for. The old woman grumbled that he was searching for the Faulkners on Sunrise, a family that had died out, muttering about the injustices of the world and how people weren't what they used to be. The younger woman paused, studying Julian more carefully. She inquired where he was from and whether he was visiting relatives or friends. After a moment, Julian replied that he had come from the capital, on behalf of a friend, to deliver something to his family. The young woman's smile widened. She remarked on his refined accent, guessing that he had been sent by the Faulkner boy, the one who had been sent away to a state institution. Julian remained silent. The woman took his silence as confirmation and explained that the Faulkner fortune had been built by the old man. But he only had a daughter. The son-in-law, a Mr. Lee, had married into the family and taken control. Now that the Faulkner line had ended, the Lees had reverted to their own name and owned everything. She gave him directions. Straight ahead, then a right, and 200 yards down the lane he would find a gate marked with the name Lee. Julian thanked her and, leading the horse, followed her instructions. His mind processed the information with a cold detachment. After a considerable walk, he saw the house. The gate was freshly painted with the name Lee, and the property beyond was festooned with ribbons and flowers, clearly prepared for a grand celebration. It was a spacious estate, far from the sort of home that would need to sell a child into state wardship to survive. He knocked. An old groundskeeper opened the gate, looked him up and down, and asked if he was here for the party. Julian spoke slowly, asking him to please inform the masters of the house that Julian Faulkner had returned for a visit. The man's eyes widened before he slammed the gate shut. Julian heard the sound of running feet inside. He stood quietly at the gate. After what felt like an eternity, the sound of a commotion grew louder. The gate was thrown open and a group of burly men holding heavy flashlights and batons emerged. The man in the lead, dressed in an expensive suit, appraised him with a flicker of surprise before his expression hardened into a snarl. He declared that wards of the state were not permitted to leave their designated institutions and demanded to know who this impostor was, trying to extort money from a respectable family. He threatened to call the county sheriff if Julian didn't leave immediately. Julian took in the scene, his heart a cold, still stone in his chest. He understood completely. He gave a slight, formal nod, turned, and led the horse away. The men watched him go, not pursuing, but murmuring amongst themselves. He walked aimlessly through the streets. Family. It was a concept he had never truly known in his previous life, and it seemed this one was no different. He was utterly alone, unburdened and unattached. He sometimes wondered if he was the reincarnation of some solitary, rootless thing, destined to be without kin in every life he lived. At the Providence Inn, Adrian nibbled on appetizers and watched the street life with amusement. Leo sat across from him, rigidly formal, barely touching his drink. A young waiter brought over a pitcher of iced tea, recommending it as their local specialty. A spring blend he should be sure to try. Adrian took a sip and praised it, remarking that it was better than the blends served in the capital. The waiter chuckled, saying that any local would tell you the finest products are kept for home, while the second best is sent to the capital. Adrian expressed his surprise, assuming only the absolute best was reserved for the nation's elite. The waiter explained that it was a matter of practicality. You could never guarantee a harvest would be as good the next year, or a batch brewed as perfectly. If you sent the absolute best one year, and couldn't match it the next, the powerful people in the capital would ask questions and heads would roll. It was safer for everyone, from the farmer to the local official, to hold the very best back. Adrian stared at the waiter, remarking that for one so young, he had a sharp tongue. The waiter grinned, guessing Adrian was from the capital and enjoyed a good story. He boasted of knowing every tale in the county and, for a few extra dollars, he'd be happy to share more. Adrian laughed and signaled for Leo to give the man a tip. Just then, the sound of music and celebratory shouts filled the street. Adrian looked out the window and saw a procession. Young men carried large, open boxes decorated with red ribbons, displaying fine fabrics and other gifts. At the head of the procession, a pair of live swans were carried in an ornate cage. A young man in an expensive suit rode a fine horse, his face beaming with pride, surrounded by a crowd of retainers clearing a path. Adrian asked if it was a wedding. The waiter laughed, explaining that it was just an engagement party. The second son of the Lee family was set to marry the county commissioner's niece. Adrian watched the arrogant young man on the horse and remarked that the Lee family seemed to be well-established local gentry. The waiter snorted. Everyone in Fairview knew the Lee's grandfather was a cobbler. Adrian replied that a man's origins shouldn't be held against him. It was impressive to build such a fortune from humble beginnings. The waiter's lips curled. He leaned in, eager to share the real story. The original Lee was dirt poor, with 3 sons he couldn't feed. He'd had his youngest, a boy of 7, adopted by the Faulkner family. The Faulkners were outsiders who had settled on Sunrise Avenue a couple of generations back and built a timber empire. They owned 2 mountains of forests and several mills. But old Mr. Faulkner had no sons, only a daughter. So he took in the Lee boy to raise alongside his daughter, hoping to groom a loyal son-in-law who would care for them in their old age and continue the family line. The 2 children grew up together, married, and soon had a son of their own. The old Faulkners, content that their legacy was secure, passed away peacefully. The Faulkner daughter, a gentle soul who had known the Lee boy her whole life, trusted him implicitly. She left the entire family business in his hands. But then, a sudden illness took her, leaving behind a 3-year-old son. Before long, the widower remarried, this time to a woman with connections to the state government. He brought his own parents to live in the Faulkner mansion, had a second son, the one in the procession, and legally changed the family name back to Lee. The entire Faulkner fortune was now his. Adrian felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He asked how a son-in-law could just seize an estate like that, whether the local authorities or community leaders didn't intervene. The waiter shrugged. Money buys silence. People gossiped, but no one acted. They thought maybe they would wait for the Faulkner boy to grow up. But the Lees were more ruthless than anyone imagined. To eliminate the last trace of the Faulkner line, they had the boy, who was only 5 or 6 at the time, declared a ward of the state and sent away to an institution for unwanted children, a place from which no one ever returned with their name or their spirit intact. Adrian felt a chill crawl up his spine, as if ice water had been poured over his head. He heard himself ask, his voice wooden, what the Faulkner boy's name was. The waiter shook his head, saying no one remembered. He was just a small child, probably long dead in some forgotten place. He added that while poverty sometimes forced families in the area to give up their children, they always hoped the child would find a better home. No one would be so cruel as to send their own flesh and blood across the country to be stripped of their identity and thrown away. Only a man without a soul would do such a thing. The iced tea in Adrian's mouth turned to ash. He remembered the blank, unreadable look on Julian's face. His hands began to tremble. He asked, his voice strained, if the boy would have known what was happening. The waiter said it was likely. Old Mr. Faulkner had been proud of his grandson, boasting that the boy was brilliant and could recognize many words at only 3 years old. He would have been old enough to understand. Adrian suddenly stood up. His jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He started for the stairs, his direction clear. He was heading for the engagement procession. Leo, startled, forgot his place and physically blocked him, hissing for Adrian to remember they were not in their own territory. He urged his governor not to be impulsive, reminding him that causing a scene would expose their identities and drag Julian into a political scandal. Adrian gripped the riding crop in his hand, the leather creaking under the pressure. He said through gritted teeth that he was afraid the Lees would try to harm Julian. They would go and find him. He strode past Leo, who hesitated for a second before following. As they reached the street, Adrian stopped abruptly, his gaze fixed across the road. Leo followed his line of sight and saw Julian standing in the crowd, the horse with its untouched gifts beside him. He was watching the proud, celebrating Lee family, his face a mask of utter neutrality, devoid of sorrow or joy. But Adrian saw, in that slender, solitary figure, an ocean of desolation. He stood frozen, his mind reeling with one thought. He had gotten it wrong again. How could he ever make this person whole? On the return journey, Leo arranged for a carriage. Inside, Adrian sat in the main seat, watching Julian's silent profile. After a long, heavy silence, he finally asked if he had seen his family. Julian nodded, his voice low. He had, and he thanked the governor for his kindness. Adrian pretended not to see the still-packed crate of gifts. He remained quiet for a long time before murmuring that one day, he would ensure Julian could return to this place in triumph. But he knew, with a sinking feeling, that a triumphant return was not what Julian wanted at all. The green spring wine, fragrant and sweet, was perfect for the evening. Julian held the silver flask directly, sipping slowly. The sleek, rectangular flask was a custom piece he had made, a copy of one he'd owned in a past life. Felt familiar in his hand. He closed his eyes, letting the pleasant buzz of alcohol soften the edges of the world, inhaling the scent of night-blooming flowers. The wine had been a gift from Adrian a few days prior. Now that he resided outside the main estate, such gestures were less frequent and more perplexing. After a solitary dinner, he had started drinking, the intoxication creeping up on him. He was grateful he no longer had to be in constant attendance to Adrian, where such indulgence would be unthinkable. His time in the territory had been peaceful, except for that one bewildering night with the governor. Lately, Adrian's actions were a puzzle he couldn't solve, culminating in the bizarre trip back to his supposed hometown. The governor was wholly dedicated to his administrative duties, earning praise from all quarters as a capable leader. Their shared night, Julian assumed, would fade into memory, an anomaly both were content to ignore. So what had been the purpose of that trip? He let himself drift in the hazy space between sleep and drunkenness. In his dreamlike state, he felt someone take the flask from his hand and gently cover him with a blanket. It must be Marcus, he thought fuzzily. The person didn't leave. He felt a light, lingering touch on his lips, the pad of a finger tracing their shape. His instincts, always sharp, screamed that something was wrong. His eyes snapped open. Adrian was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking down at him with a soft smile. His long, cool fingers had trailed down to Julian's neck. Startled, Julian tried to sit up, but the alcohol betrayed him. He staggered, the room spinning. Adrian gently pushed him back down onto the pillows, chuckling that he knew Julian couldn't handle fine wine. This vintage was a new honey and osmanthus brew from the estate's own gardens, potent and meant to be diluted. Julian's mind was clear, but his body refused to obey. A sense of alarm rose in him as Adrian continued to smile, reaching over to undo the pin holding Julian's hair. He let the dark strands fall loose around his shoulders, remarking that it was more comfortable this way. Adrian explained that he had been inspecting the new irrigation projects and, on his way back, realized he was near Julian's residence. He had sent the others ahead, wanting to see him, and here he'd found a drunken cat, drinking all alone. What was the fun in that? He picked up the silver flask, commenting on its unusual, foreign design. Uncapping it, he drank directly from where Julian's lips had been. He smiled, a slow, lazy expression. He said he'd never understood Julian's fondness for drink, but he'd tried some of the farmer's homemade liquor that day. It was rough, but it had character, especially with smoked meats and pickles. He then reached into his coat and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in a linen cloth. He unwrapped it and held a small, golden berry to Julian's lips. Julian chewed it mechanically. It was sweet with a faint, tangy aftertaste. He didn't recognize the fruit. Adrian smiled, asking if it was good. A child from one of the farms had given them to him. They were called sunberries. The boy had saved the first ones of the season for his governor. Adrian had thought Julian might never have tried them, so he had saved them for him. Julian stated numbly that Elias and Angstrom would never let him eat strange things from outside the estate. Adrian laughed. He hadn't brought them along. Besides, they couldn't control him anymore. He couldn't refuse such a heartfelt gift from a child. He offered the rest of the berries to Julian. As Julian turned his head to take the cloth, his body, limp with alcohol, sank further into the pillows. He fought to keep his eyes open, but the wine had softened his features, blurring his focus. A flush spread across his cheeks like rouge, and his lips, parted and reddened from the drink, were impossibly alluring. The collar of his worn, comfortable robe had fallen open, revealing the elegant line of his collarbone. Adrian felt an irresistible pull. He leaned down and gently pressed his lips to Julian's. Julian flinched, a sharp intake of breath. The berries scattered across the bedsheets. Adrian looked at him, startled and wide-eyed like a cornered cat, and couldn't help but laugh. He reached out, his hand gently stroking Julian's shoulder, and leaned in again, his mouth claiming Julian's in a deep, searching kiss. It was a kiss that left no room for resistance, soft yet insistent, lingering and sweet. Julian's mind went blank. His body was like clay, his attempts to push Adrian away feeling more like a hesitant embrace. In that moment, Adrian felt something powerful surge within him, a desire so potent it threatened to burst from his chest. He wanted this person. Reluctantly, he broke the kiss and looked down at Julian's flushed face, his hands moving to unfasten his robe. The moonlight, filtering through the window, illuminated Julian's pale chest as the fabric fell away. As Adrian lowered his head to kiss him again, Julian finally found the strength to resist. He pushed at Adrian's head, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Your Grace, no." Adrian looked up, a smile still playing on his lips, ready with a gentle persuasion. But the look in Julian's eyes, serious, clear, and cold, stopped him. The smile faded from his face. "You are not pleased." Julian took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to clear his head. "Your Grace, I am not Sarah." Adrian's face went rigid. "When have I ever mistaken you for her?" How could he think that? But a slow, creeping dread, like a premonition, coiled in his gut. Julian struggled to sit up, pulling his robe closed. "My apologies, I misspoke. But this attention, this gentle care you show me now, is it any different from how you treated her? When she was unhappy, you took her on trips, played music for her, placated her. Seems to be your way. A cherished royal pet, taken out for a walk when it's sullen, played with when it's amusing." Adrian stood, his eyes turning to ice. "Is that how you see me?" He towered over Julian, a prince of the blood, looking down at a man who was little more than dust beneath his feet. Yet, in that moment, he felt inexplicably small. Sarah was gone, dead and buried, but her ghost now stood between them, a cold, impassable barrier. The scent of wisteria drifted in from the garden on the night breeze. Julian could see the fury on Adrian's face but pressed on. "Your Grace's condescension and protection, I am grateful for it all. But you misunderstand me. My devotion to you is not the same as hers was. My only desire is to manage your commercial interests and serve this territory, to ease your burdens. I have no other ambitions." Adrian stared at him, the warmth in his eyes slowly extinguishing, replaced by a profound and chilling cold. But Julian did not look away. His dark eyes were as clear and bright as winter stars, a transparent surface that somehow revealed nothing of the depths beneath. They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Adrian turned on his heel and strode out of the house. Julian pressed his fingers to his throbbing temples. The night air was cool, but a cold sweat slicked his back. All traces of his intoxication had vanished. A few moments later, Marcus came in. He asked if the governor had left, then noticed the mess. "What are all these things scattered on the floor?" Julian looked down and saw the tiny, golden berries gleaming like scattered jewels on the dark floorboards and white sheets. No one would ever know that these simple wild fruits had once been treasured, wrapped carefully in a linen cloth and carried close to the heart of a governor. The next morning, he woke with a splitting headache. The thought of facing the world after so brazenly rejecting Adrian filled him with a weary dread. But his attendant, Seth, rushed in with a message from the North Star Logistics Company. The head manager, Chris, was back from a long trip with a new shipment and requested his presence. Julian forced himself to rise and dress. Chris had been gone all winter. The profits from this new cargo would be substantial. He had to go. When he arrived at the bustling warehouse, however, an unexpected person was waiting for him. Mia. A year had transformed her into a poised young woman. The moment she saw him, she ran over and threw her arms around him, her eyes red. "Julian, I've missed you so much." Julian, though surprised, was genuinely happy to see her. He asked why she wasn't back in the capital enjoying her life. He had taken her in when she was just 11, taught her accounting, literacy, and how to manage the business. Their bond was deep. Seeing her bright, familiar face eased the gloom that had settled over him. Nearby, her brother Chris was complaining. He had been trying to find her a suitable husband, but she'd been picky about every candidate. Then, when he was finally ready to lead the convoy out to the territory, she had snuck aboard one of the trucks. He told her she could come for a short visit, but she had to go back. What would people say if they knew she was traveling with a rough crew of truckers? It would ruin her prospects. Julian looked down at Mia, who was looking up at him with a pleading expression. her nose and eyes still pink. She was so endearing that his heart softened. He told Chris it was a long journey. He should at least take her to see the local markets. Maybe even a trip up to the plains to see the wild horse herds before sending her back. Mia cheered, exclaiming that she knew Julian was the one who cared about her most. Chris threw up his hands in exasperation. What did a young lady need to see the world for? It would only give her ideas. Then a thought struck him. Perhaps they could find a good match for her right here in the territory, where they could keep an eye on her. Mia hid behind Julian, sticking her tongue out at her brother. She declared that she wasn't in a hurry to get married and that Julian had to take her to dinner that night. Julian laughed and agreed. They had all had a long journey and deserved a good meal. He sent someone to book a private room at the Five Fortunes restaurant and another to prepare a car. That evening, Adrian, dressed in casual clothes, was returning from an inspection of the new school. As his car passed the North Star Logistics building, he instinctively lifted the curtain to look. He saw Julian standing by the entrance next to a dark green sedan. His head tilted up, a brilliant smile on his face as he spoke to someone inside. A jolt went through Adrian's heart. He peered into the car just as the wind blew, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a young woman in a daffodil yellow blouse leaning out, her hand on the door, laughing up at Julian. Her dark eyes sparkled, her cheeks were flushed, and she radiated a vibrant, youthful energy. It was just a glimpse, but it was enough to stun him. He was certain he had seen her somewhere before. He dropped the curtain, a wave of cold displeasure washing over him. The servant who had caused him a sleepless night seemed to have moved on without a care in the world, laughing and enjoying himself. It was just like that time years ago, when he had thought Julian was in danger, searching frantically for him, only to find him living freely on his own. Suddenly, he remembered where he'd seen the girl. It was in Charleston, that time he had stumbled upon Julian living his own life. She had been with him then, too. Adrian frowned, lost in thought. The car arrived back at the estate. As he stepped out, Elias greeted him. Adrian gave a curt order for either Seth or Marcus, whichever of Julian's attendants was available, to report to him after their duties were finished that evening. At sunset, the study was bathed in a fiery glow. Seth stood before Adrian, his hands clasped, sweat beading on his brow. He had rarely spoken directly to the governor and was terrified. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor as he answered Adrian's questions. He reported that the young woman was Chris's sister. Everyone at the company knew her as an excellent bookkeeper, supposedly trained by a Mr. Cromwell, the company's reclusive co-founder who was said to be in poor health and rarely seen. Most of the local employees had never met this Mr. Cromwell. It was the sisters' first time visiting the territory. The only other people who had come from the capital office were two senior managers who had been with Chris since the company's early days and held shares. They were tight-lipped, only saying that Mr. Cromwell was often ill. Adrian sat in silence, his fingers slowly tracing the rim of a fine porcelain teacup. After a long pause, he asked what the girl's name was. Seth's back was soaked with sweat. He explained that Julian hadn't allowed him to attend the dinner, sending him back to his own residence instead. But he had overheard someone call Julian by a nickname. Sounded like Jules. Adrian let out a cold, sharp breath and set the teacup back on its saucer with a distinct click. Seth didn't dare breathe. The governor was known for his composure, but his displeasure was now palpable. Adrian dismissed him with a wave, instructing him to continue his service and report anything unusual. Once Seth had scurried out, Adrian turned to Elias, who had been standing silently in the corner. He said that he had found Julian in Charleston, assuming he was just a runaway. He had never investigated further. Now he realized that his mother, that master strategist, must have known what Julian was doing all along and still allowed him back into Adrian's service. Elias knelt, his head bowed. Adrian's voice was like ice. He recalled how swiftly Elias had dealt with another aide who had tried to leave his service. If Julian had been a liability back then, his mother would have had him disposed of quietly. This North Star Logistics must have been one of her secret assets. The timeline fit. The company was founded in Charleston and expanded to the capital right around the time Julian had disappeared. This Mr. Cromwell was Julian himself. He had been managing his mother's empire for her. Stumbling upon him in Charleston had been an accident. His mother had simply used the opportunity to place Julian back by Adrian's side, likely because her own health was failing and she wanted a capable and discreet agent to watch over her son. Julian was fiercely independent. He chafed at servitude. So this Chris and his sister, Mia, they were his leverage. His mother would have her own people embedded in the company, loyal only to her, ensuring Julian remained obediently by Adrian's side. His voice was calm, but Elias knew it was the calm of a raging storm. He prostrated himself, his forehead touching the floor, and whispered that the governor was wise. Before the words were even out of his mouth, Adrian swept the teacup from the desk. It shattered against the marble floor. His chest heaved. "You all kept me in the dark," he seethed. Elias remained motionless, silent. Adrian stood, the frustration inside him a physical pressure. He paced for a moment, then stopped. He instructed Elias to send a message to Julian. His services were no longer required at the estate. He was free to conduct his business as he saw fit. If his service wasn't heartfelt, Adrian had no use for it. As he spoke the last words, a bitter realization struck him. Who among his staff truly served him out of loyalty? They were all bound to him by circumstance and power. His mother was gone. He was truly alone. A wave of profound grief washed over him, but he refused to show it in front of Elias. He stormed out of the study, walking blindly into the vast, empty grounds of his territory, a gilded cage where he was the lord of everything and the master of nothing. He had even, for a time, allowed himself to hope for the honest affection of a single attendant. All his recent kindness and favor now felt like a fool's delusion. When Julian received the message from Elias, he was perplexed but not entirely surprised. His rejection had clearly wounded Adrian's pride. A mere pet had dared to refuse its master's affection. That Adrian was only banishing him from his presence was, in its way, a sign of restraint. He found himself, with a wry, self-deprecating humor, actually considering Adrian's perspective, even feeling a pang of guilt. He was becoming institutionalized, a classic case of Stockholm Syndrome. But he had also earned Adrian a considerable fortune. Adrian was no fool. He wouldn't discard a valuable asset over a personal slight. As long as Julian was useful, and as long as Adrian's political position remained precarious, he was safe. He put the matter aside and focused on showing Mia the territory. Mia, seeing how Julian managed several businesses single-handedly, felt a pang of sympathy for him. She refused to return to the capital, casting off her carefully constructed persona and declaring herself content to be plain Mia Cromwell. She stayed, helping Julian with the accounts each day. Her assistance was a huge relief. Seeing her so determined, Chris bought and renovated the house next to Julian's, and the three of them settled into a new life in the north. Spring in the territory was brief. Summer arrived, and Adrian did not summon Julian. The name Deputy Manager Julian Faulkner became a whispered legend among the new staff at the estate. Julian focused on his businesses, reporting financials to Elias periodically and handling discreet procurements on his behalf. Horses, weapons, items that couldn't appear on official ledgers. He felt a sense of freedom he hadn't known since his early days in Charleston. Because a governor could not officially engage in commerce, Julian's businesses were structured to appear independent of the estate. He operated under the name Cromwell, and over time, the region came to know of a mysterious and powerful merchant named Cromwell with deep pockets and connections everywhere. He heard snippets of Adrian's life from Marcus or Seth. The governor doted on his young son, moving the boy into his own wing of the estate to raise him personally. But the child, having lost his mother at a young age, was frail and often sick. The ladies of Adrian's court vied for the position of his new wife, but out of respect for his late wife, he made no decision. One of these ladies, hearing of Julian's influence, even tried to send him a lavish gift through Marcus, a gesture he found both amusing and irritating and had to politely refuse. Time passed quickly. The president's birthday came and went without a summons for Adrian to the capital. It seemed that physical distance had cooled the relationship between the nation's leader and his former favorite. Then came the news. The president had officially named his eldest son, Conrad, as his successor. Celebrations were held across the country. But Conrad's mother, the First Lady, remained in her position without being elevated, leaving Conrad's status as the heir somewhat ambiguous. Julian could only imagine the First Lady's fury. He wondered how Adrian was taking the news. Publicly, he was the picture of stability, inspecting border defenses, hosting symposiums at the Beacon Library, taking his son on outings. Julian saw the gubernatorial motorcade once from a distance. Adrian, surrounded by his retinue, looked as composed and regal as ever, but the last vestiges of youthful softness had vanished from his face, replaced by a stern, remote authority. It was the day for the monthly financial report. Julian finalized the ledgers and sent them with Marcus to the estate. When Marcus returned, he reported that Elias had been disciplined. He had bruises and couldn't move easily, so he had just taken the books, saying he would review them later. Julian was shocked. Elias was a legacy from Adrian's mother. Adrian had always treated him with respect. Marcus explained that the governor was worried about his son, who was still not speaking much and was constantly ill. The boy hadn't been eating, and Adrian lost his temper. He had summoned the child's caretakers for an accounting. Elias had suggested that the boy needed a mother's care and that Adrian should choose a new wife. The governor had exploded in fury, publicly rebuking Elias for overstepping his bounds. Elias had knelt to ask for forgiveness, and Adrian had left him there for over an hour before Angstrom finally helped him up. The entire estate was now on edge. Julian sighed. He could picture Adrian's face. The news from the capital had been one blow after another. Adrian, with his immense self-control, had bottled up his frustration, and Elias had unwittingly provided the spark. A few days later, Adrian returned from a symposium to his private courtyard and heard his son, Sterling, squealing with a delight he had never heard before. He entered to see a small white puppy chasing a ball across the lawn. Sterling was in his nanny's arms, struggling to get down, his eyes fixed on the puppy, babbling excitedly. He didn't even notice his father's arrival. As the nanny carried him closer, the puppy saw Adrian and froze. The staff began to bow, but Adrian waved them off. Sterling, seeing his father, pointed a chubby finger and managed a single, clear word, "Dog." Adrian took the boy in his arms and asked Elias, who was standing stiffly nearby, where the dog had come from. Elias replied that it was a gift from Mr. Faulkner. He had acquired some fine sheepdog puppies from the plains, had them cleaned and checked by a vet, and sent the best one over. He had suggested that a pet might encourage the young master to be more active and cheerful. Elias had taken the liberty of letting Sterling see it, pending the governor's approval. Adrian looked at his son, who was still squirming and babbling about the dog, then at the clumsy, fluffy puppy. He was silent for a moment before setting Sterling on the ground. The boy toddled over to the puppy, and the two began to play, a gaggle of nervous attendants hovering nearby. Sterling, who usually had to be coaxed to even stand, was now running, his face flushed with exertion, giggling as he wrestled the ball away from the puppy. Adrian let out a short, wry laugh. Still full of clever ideas just like before, Elias held his breath. Since the incident, he had been walking on eggshells. Today's move had been a gamble, but seeing the hint of a thaw on Adrian's face, he began to relax. Adrian announced that the dog could stay, then turned and went inside. The staff around Sterling breathed a collective sigh of relief. The puppy, named Wish, thrived at the estate. He grew strong and handsome, and he and Sterling became inseparable. The boy grew stronger too. His speech improved, and his laughter filled the courtyard. Sometimes Adrian would sit and watch them, and a rare smile would touch his lips. He remarked to Elias one day that the dog was more straightforward than most people. You never had to guess what it was thinking. Elias knew there was a deeper meaning to the words but said nothing. Adrian added that while life rarely went according to one's wishes, this dog might come closer than any person could. Julian knew none of this. He had simply seen the puppies at the market and remembered hearing about the young master's troubles. It was a simple, practical gesture. He was more concerned with a new problem. The supply of horses at the market was drying up. Rumors were spreading of a plague among the herds on the plains. Some tribesmen had tried to sell sick animals at the market, but Julian's experienced hands had spotted them. For a year, he had been steadily buying horses and covertly transferring them to Adrian's control, but now his supply chain was broken. He sensed a growing unrest among the plains tribes. One day, Lawrence Kane and Ray Thorne, one of Adrian's captains, came to visit him. Lawrence, now Adrian's chief of staff, still enjoyed dropping by Julian's house for a drink and a conversation that was mostly a monologue on his part. This time, Julian shared his concerns about the livestock plague. Lawrence's expression grew serious. He understood the implication. When the Plains tribe's livelihood was destroyed, they would turn to raiding the settled lands to the south. Ray, who had tribal blood himself, was skeptical, but Lawrence pointed out that historical precedent was clear. Famine on the plains always led to war on the border. It was a matter of survival. This wasn't just about a few scattered raids. If the plague was severe enough, it could escalate into a full-scale invasion that threatened the entire territory. Mia, bringing in a plate of smoked chicken, overheard them and added a piece of gossip from the capital. She'd heard that the president's eldest son, Conrad, had an illegitimate child who was said to be brilliant and bear a striking resemblance to Adrian's deceased younger brother, a child prodigy the president had adored. The president was now doting on this grandchild, even raising him in the presidential residence. Julian now understood the source of Adrian's recent dark moods. He was surely comparing his own quiet, frail son to the memory of his brilliant brother and this new, precocious nephew. The weight of expectation was a crushing burden. After the guests left, Mia lingered. She rested her head on Julian's lap and asked softly if it wouldn't be nice if she could just stay and take care of him forever. Julian stroked her hair gently. He told her she was a smart, beautiful young woman with her whole life ahead of her. He reminded her that the staff all called him Mr. Faulkner, a formal title, but that his real status was an open secret. He was a man who could never marry, who could never have a family of his own. Mia's eyes filled with tears. She argued that she had seen men like him in the capital with wives who ran their households. She could do that for him. She didn't care about children. Julian's expression softened with a deep sadness. He explained that she didn't understand. A husband was someone who could protect her, build a life with her, be a true partner. He couldn't be that for her. He and her brother could only offer her a safe harbor to return to if the world treated her unkindly. She was confusing fraternal affection with romantic love. She still had a chance to find the real thing. A life full of love and children and shared joy. A life he could never know. Mia began to sob quietly, and Julian held her, knowing her tears were not just for him, but for the fear of a future she couldn't control. A few weeks later, Elias arrived at Julian's residence late one night. He looked worried. The governor, he explained, had just returned from an inspection of the border defenses and was deeply concerned. The garrisons were underfunded, and the Doyan tribe's longtime allies were suffering terribly from the livestock plague. They were begging the governor for aid, but the territory's coffers were empty. Lawrence Kane was insisting every spare dollar go to military readiness. Adrian had written a desperate appeal to the capital for disaster relief, but the letter, like all his recent communications, had gone unanswered. The governor was now talking about selling off personal assets, family heirlooms, to raise funds. Elias had come to Julian as a last resort, asking if there was any way to access the funds from his commercial enterprises. Julian frowned. He told Elias that forcibly seizing the assets of the tribe's wealthy leaders would be more effective than charity. But Elias countered that the governor's compassion and the strategic importance of the Doyan alliance made that impossible. The situation was desperate. Julian thought for a moment. There was a way, he said, to raise a large sum of money quickly for a charitable cause. It was unconventional. He would write up a proposal and send it to the estate in the morning. The next day, Elias presented Adrian with Julian's detailed plan, a disaster relief charity auction. A smile touched Adrian's lips as he read the familiar, neat handwriting. The plan was audacious. Leverage the temple's tradition of auctioning blessed items, have the respected Dr. Branch preside to lend it legitimacy, and use the governor's authority to solicit donations from the wealthy merchants and gentry of the territory. Adrian would contribute a few personal items and some of his own calligraphy. It was the same bold, slightly irreverent thinking Julian had used years ago when designing the estate's gardens. So many years had passed, and yet he was still the same. Adrian gave the order to proceed. The auction was a massive undertaking, and Julian oversaw every detail. It was an unprecedented event, drawing merchants from all over the region, even from overseas. The 3-day event was a resounding success, raising an astonishing sum. On the final day, Adrian summoned Julian to the private viewing box he occupied. He was dressed in a formal, dark suit of immense dignity. He stood by the railing, idly twirling a sprig of winter jasmine. He watched Julian for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. Finally, he said that Julian had done well, that he was to be commended for his hard work. Julian opened his mouth to offer the standard reply about serving his governor, but Adrian cut him off with a single, quiet command. "You may go." Julian left, sensing that while Adrian was pleased with the outcome, the personal frost between them had not thawed. The auction earned Adrian a rare personal commendation from the president, a warm message that seemed to paper over the months of cold silence. The relief funds were distributed, and for a time, a fragile peace settled over the borderlands. But as spring warmed into summer, the plague on the plains worsened. Raiding parties from other, more hostile tribes began to cross the border. Thanks to Adrian's earlier reinforcements and the organization of local militias, the territory suffered minimal losses. The raiders shifted their attention to the neighboring, less defended county of Open Plains. Then the unthinkable happened. A coalition of tribes, 10,000 strong, descended on the city of Open Plains in a surprise night attack. The city fell in hours. The ensuing massacre shocked the nation. The capital, finally roused to action, dispatched a federal army under the command of General Marcus Kane, Lawrence's uncle and a powerful political rival of Adrian's family. Adrian was ordered to lead his own force of 5,000 men to coordinate with the federal troops. As he prepared to march out, he made a startling appointment. Julian Faulkner was to remain behind as the acting regent and civil administrator of the capital city. Julian, busy securing his businesses for the impending war, was blindsided. He went to the estate's chief historian, a man named Horace, for an explanation. Horace explained that with General Kane in command of the larger army, and with Captain Raythorn and other loyal officers marching with Adrian, the governor needed someone absolutely trustworthy, intelligent, and resourceful to protect his home base. The precedent of appointing a civilian administrator in wartime was rare, but not unheard of. It was a sign of the governor's ultimate trust. The day of the army's departure was cold and windy. Julian stood with the other officials watching as Adrian, clad in the dark, functional uniform of a field commander, addressed his troops. He sat astride his horse, his bearing as regal and commanding as any ancient king, his voice ringing with authority as he spoke of duty and honor. A great roar went up from the soldiers, the sound echoing across the plains. As the army marched away, the ground trembling beneath their feet, Julian felt an unexpected surge of emotion. Adrian was barely 20 years old. He was a scholar and a statesman, now forced to become a warrior, to lead men into the bloody, brutal reality of close-quarters combat. What a strange and cruel relationship these powerful men had with their sons, to send them down such a perilous path. The capital city went into lockdown. Julian, now in an official capacity, worked closely with the remaining military commander, a grizzled veteran named General Reed. At their first staff meeting, Julian, after listening to Reed's competent deployment plans, made a simple suggestion. He proposed a program to boost morale. Soldiers would be paid a small bonus out of the governor's private funds for memorizing and reciting daily slogans about patriotism, defending their homes, and the honor of their service. Reed was skeptical, but Julian was insistent. The city's defenders were a motley crew of career soldiers, ex-convicts, and locals of mixed heritage. Their loyalty to the abstract idea of the nation was questionable. But through daily, incentivized repetition, Julian hoped to instill in them a sense of shared purpose, a psychological armor that might make the difference in a moment of crisis. 10 days later, a report arrived. Governor Thorne's army had engaged the enemy at Open Plains and, after a ferocious 3-day battle, had retaken the city. A wave of jubilation swept through the capital. But the victory was short-lived. Julian was woken in the dead of night by the frantic ringing of alarm bells. He rushed to the city walls and saw a sight that made his blood run cold. The plains below were a sea of campfires, an endless swarm of enemy soldiers. It was an army 10 times the size of their own. Reed, his face pale beneath his helmet, stood beside him. "The Doyen tribes," he rasped. "They've betrayed us." He pointed to a distant banner. "And that's the flag of the Valen Horde. The governor has been flanked. He's trapped." The attack began. Ladders scraped against the walls. Soldiers swarmed up. and the air filled with the sounds of battle and the stench of blood. Reed, a seasoned commander, orchestrated the defense with grim efficiency, his orders cutting through the chaos. But the sheer number of attackers was overwhelming. Reed yelled at Julian to get below, that the walls were about to become a slaughterhouse. Julian refused, instead moving to coordinate the supply lines, ensuring that ammunition, boiling oil, and medical supplies reached the defenders without interruption. The siege stretched into its third day. The defenders were exhausted, moving like automatons, their faces grim and numb. Reed's voice was a raw croak. He confessed to Julian that their only hope was the federal army, but they both knew, without saying it, that General Kane was unlikely to arrive in time. The political calculus was clear. A weakened or defeated Governor Thorne served the Kane family's interests perfectly. They were on their own. Then, from the enemy lines, 3 young men were brought forward and tied to stakes. They were the sons of the Doyen chieftains, who had been living in the capital as students and hostages. Reed declared his intention to execute them on the walls, to show the traitors the price of their betrayal. Julian stopped him. Killing them, he argued, would only fuel the enemy's hatred. Instead, he had the boys brought to him. He spoke to them not of threats, but of honor, of the kindness the governor had shown their people, of the shame of their father's actions. Then he ordered them released, along with their attendants, and sent them back to their own lines. Reed was aghast, but Julian explained his reasoning. The Doyen were now allied with the Valen and the other tribes, a coalition of convenience. Sending the sons back, unharmed, would sow suspicion and discord in their ranks. It was a small gamble, but it was all they had. That night, Horace, the historian, came to Julian with an urgent message. He was an amateur meteorologist and was certain, based on his observations, that a dense pre-dawn fog was about to roll in. He also revealed a secret. The governor had left behind a contingent of 500 elite Black Ops soldiers, with orders that if the city was about to fall, Julian was to take them and escort the young master, Sterling, to safety. Julian was stunned into silence, then filled with a white-hot rage. He was to abandon the city? Abandon these people to be slaughtered? He told Horace that the fog was not a chance to escape, but a chance to win. He took command of the 500 elite soldiers, whose leader was, to his surprise, Leo, Adrian's most trusted guard. He laid out a daring plan. He had the city's craftsmen work through the night, creating crude but powerful explosive projectiles laced with shrapnel, to be launched from the city's heavy crossbows. Before dawn, as the enemy slept, a thick, disorienting fog enveloped the plains. The attack began not with a charge, but with a barrage. The makeshift bombs rained down on the enemy camp, sowing chaos and terror. Then, as the enemy stumbled blindly through the fog, the city gates opened. Leo led the 500 elite soldiers, a silent, deadly force, straight into the heart of the enemy's command tents. Simultaneously, Reed led a charge of 3,000 of his best men. Their war cry, "Long live the governor," the only sound identifying them in the chaos. The enemy, caught completely by surprise, their command structure decapitated, their forces unable to distinguish friend from foe in the fog, collapsed into a panicked rout. It was a slaughter. As the morning sun burned away the last of the fog, the battlefield was a scene of utter carnage, littered with the bodies and abandoned equipment of a shattered army. A ragged, delirious cheer rose from the defenders on the city walls. Reed stood beside Julian, tears streaming down his face, laughing. "I've been a soldier for 40 years, he roared, "and that was the most beautiful victory I have ever seen." The soldiers took up the cry, "Heaven protects the governor." Julian stood watching the grim tableau below, a faint, weary smile on his lips. Then it vanished. He gave his next order. No pursuit. Recall our men, and send scouts to open plains. Find out what has happened to the governor. Reed nodded, his face now etched with the same worry that gripped Julian's heart. He looked at Julian, at the pale, exhausted face, the eyes sharp and brilliant with a terrifying intelligence, and saw not a servant, but a commander. The hardship of the last few days had forged a bond of respect between them born of shared desperation and survival. This was a man he would follow into hell.